Way too early fantasy football rankings for 2026. This is a position ranking video. We will take a look at my top 24 at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end, of course. And I will highlight guys that I am noticeably higher and lower on than other fantasy analysts. We have a ton to cover. Let's go ahead and dive right in. I'm going to start off at running back, very standard up top. You won't see a ton of variance with people in their top five. After that is where things get very interesting. Very interesting. You hit on players that had underwhelming 2025 seasons for their ADP, like Saquon Barkley and Ashton Genty. Then you get into a nice safe range of dependable RB1s. You've got your RB2s that are guys that have some question marks in free agency, if not for themselves, like Javonte Williams and Breece Hall, but for those on their team, like Bucky Irving with his backfield mates set to hit free agency. One guy that I want to highlight is Saquon Barkley. We talked about him in the bounce back video. I'm going to be higher on Saquon Barkley than consensus, significantly higher, more than likely. I would be willing to take him in early round 2, and you are more than likely going to see him fall to round 3 in the majority of drafts after his underwhelming 2025 season. His 2025 issue was his aggressive workload regression. Most players do not have a workload of 345 carries, over 2,000 yards in 16 plus games, plus receiving work, plus postseason work, carrying him all the way to the Super Bowl and actually be able to repeat that the following year. It's an outlier workload, and it's not really actually repeatable here. It is just extremely hard on the body. Then you add in the Eagles going through their every other year cycle of struggling after losing a coordinator, and it was just a terrible combination for them. We will have to see how much workload Barkley accumulates in the playoffs, but as of right now, he's at 280 carries on the season and roughly the same amount of receptions that he had, with a significantly decrease in his overall workload, right? And that's great. That's great news for us heading into the 2026 season. We don't have any threats of anyone stealing his workload. The Eagles' offense can't get any worse, theoretically. No, it can't get any worse. And obviously, the product that they put on the field in 2025, they're going to naturally bounce back here. And I think that he will return back to top 5 status. It'll be very interesting to see where they head with coordinator, assuming, postseason pending, of course, assuming they fire and move on. I would love to see a coordinator that comes in and heavily features running backs as an option and helps Saquon get back to that more traditional workload in the pass game so that he doesn't have to overwork his body to get the production that we need from him. A guy I'm going to be lower on than other fantasy analysts is going to be Omari and Hampton. I am going to be lower all throughout draft season unless the Chargers straight up tell us that they will not be using other backs and that it is only Amari and Hampton's backfield. They're not going to be working other guys in. Because what I saw when Amari and Hampton returned is not someone that I want to draft with an extremely early pick, which could be like a borderline round 2 pick. That's a little aggressive for me, for somebody that does not have a massive workload. Now, there was no major issue with him. I got no beef with him. He's extremely talented. He did well with the workload that he had. But there was a very clear and visible capped ceiling because of the presence of Kamani Vidal. In his final 4 games of the season, he had between 13 and 16 carries in every single game, and he had between 29 and 85 yards. He had a touchdown in all but 1 of those games. No issue, solid, reliable, and to be very fair to him, those 29 yards were against Houston, so I give him a pass on that. I would not even include that in terms of a reference point there. He was between RB 12 and 16 in 3 of those games, and he was RB 36 in the one where he didn't score the touchdown. The problem is that the Chargers have been abundantly clear that they prefer a committee, and they have expressed that they love what Kamani Vidal brought to the table when Amari Hampton was injured. And the only times that we saw him in that top 10 ceiling range was immediately after. That's Amari Hampton. The only time that we saw that was immediately after Najee Harris got injured, before they opted to incorporate other backs. If Hampton's ADP stays in the 10 to 14 running back range, I'm good. I'm good with that. But if it tilts towards going over guys like Josh Jacobs, Ashton Genty, Saquon Barkley, guys who are the unquestioned volume backs on their team, it's a little too rich for my blood, unfortunately. He's a solid low-end borderline RB1, but I don't consistently see him getting those ceiling games, those massive ceiling games that the true workhorse and high-volume receiving backs get. He's a tier gap for me, and he could push down further into the gap depending on how free agency shakes out, again, with those Bucks running backs, those Bucks backup running backs, and then again, how everything ends up with Travis Etienne. And then, of course, heading back to the top 24 here, you will see that there's a lot of guys that are going to be in flux here. We've got the injured running backs that'll be coming back in Cam Scattaboo and Quinshon Judkins. Obviously, those are going to be very ebb and flow situations depending on their recovery. And then we've also got players who will not be solidified until after free agency and the draft, when we know how much we can actually trust the workload that they have and if they are the true RB1 on their team. That's guys like Rico Dowdle and Woody Marks. Now at quarterback, a couple of things to note before I highlight some players here. You will notice that I am not adjusting my view of Lamar Jackson. We talked about this in the bounce back video. When Lamar Jackson is actually healthy, which, was only a tiny portion of the season, right? So when he was actually healthy this past season, the 3 games of the season that he was actually fully healthy pre-injury, those were all top 5 performances where he had a minimum of 26 fantasy points. He is who he is. Yes, we're having changes in head coach and philosophy and all that good stuff. I would treat him the same as you treat a healthy version of him. Then you will also notice that I am clearly very significantly high on Trevor Lawrence, my boy there. I think that we are only seeing the beginning of what Liam Cohen will bring to this team, and that Trevor Lawrence, cross our fingers, is truly a changed man, and I cannot wait to see him with a fully healthy receiving core. Now, players that I want to highlight here. Patrick Mahomes. I'm being cautious with his ranking right now. That is only right now because we need to see what this recovery process looks like for him, because it's not about if Patrick Mahomes will be ready to play at the beginning of the 2026 season. That's what he's targeting. I have faith. He is very motivated. He's the type of player that I do think will hit his mark there, but it's about how mobile he will be. Now, Patrick Mahomes is theoretically not a running quarterback, right? He's not Lamar Jackson, but he definitely ran in 2025, and it has always been a part of his game, but he really kicked it into overdrive in 2025, and that makes sense. His receiving options were underwhelming. Rashee Rice was out for 6 games. Xavier Worthy honestly looked like a wide receiver 3 all season long. Yeah, he was playing through an injury for some of that, but even as the season went on, he didn't quite look like he was up to par there. Travis Kelce looked well seasoned this season, and Mahomes tried to put the team on his back, and the result was career highs in rushing yards and rushing touchdowns in literally just 14 games. So the rushing upside was excellent here, especially from a fantasy perspective for us. Add that to the passing volume, and his ceiling was consistently top 5. Weeks 1 through 9, he literally had 7 of his 9 games with a finish of QB 6 or higher. This was the bounce back that we needed to see after a very underwhelming 2024 and kind of underwhelming 2023. Things were starting to look like he wasn't going to be the high ceiling, reliable fantasy quarterback that we had come to know, but he bounced back perfectly and showcased he is who we think he is. Now, all things equal, if he were heading into the season fully healthy, heading into preseason fully healthy, Mahomes would be an easy top 5 pick for me at the position, because I do think a healthy version of him is more reliable than a guys like Jalen Hurts and Jaden Daniels. So for right now, as a caution, due to the injury, he is QB9 just to give us a little safe range and not be too aggressive in draft investment. But I'm going to be watching this one like a hawk because I liked what I saw in 2025. And if he can repeat that level of mobility, I feel really good about it. I have seen Jackson Dart shooting up rankings, and I am going to recommend a lot of caution in overdrafting him. Quite frankly, QB 11 feels a little high. It feels a little aggressive. I could move him back theoretically behind Caleb Williams and Brock Purdy, honestly, depending on who the coaching hire is for the Giants and what the recovery is like for Malik Neighbors. We talked about several things that we got right and wrong. And one of the things that we talked about was really emphasizing that when I say we, I'm including me heavily in that. I was guilty too. We were way too flippant about the second year regression potential for certain quarterbacks. And I do not want us to overlook that potential with Jackson Dart. Now, there is the possibility that he goes the Drake May route, right? Drake May was never a second-year regression candidate because there was nothing to regress from. He never really hit his peak in his rookie. He looked excellent. No insult or negatives, but he never really hit his peak in his rookie season. And the Patriots were just straight up a disaster. No wide receiver 1, no offensive line, no defense, really. all that does hit home for Jackson Dart as being the same kind of script. So that is why Dart is not a full fade for me in the sense of panicking about a second year regression, and still top 12 at the position. But we do need to be a little bit cautious there. And I hesitate to raise him up where I've seen some people having him, which is literally borderline QB6, very close there. I hesitate not just because of the potential for regression, but because his floor was kind of shaky. His rushing upside definitely gives him an excellent ceiling. Pass volume has to get better for his floor to improve. Now, obviously, the addition of Malik Neighbors will definitely do that, but it's very possible that they run into the same issue that JJ McCarthy and Justin Jefferson had, a lack of massive rapport there, unfortunately. Dart and Neighbors did not overlap for us to truly know how solid that connection is, and they prepared for last season with Russell Wilson as the starter here. So this is kind of a shaky situation where there's a lot of unknowns, and we do have to worry about any potential reduction in his running as well, since he clearly needs to avoid concussions. So we might just want to be a little bit cautious here. At wide receiver, clearly, Puka Nacua, Jamar Chase, our most trusted wide receivers. JSN's 2025 put him right up there in the mix. CeeDee Lamb obviously underwhelmed this season, but he still commanded a significant target share worthy of retaining his position here as a top receiver. Amon-Ra St. Brown doesn't have the ceiling of the other guys here, but you cannot argue with his consistency. I want to point that out because it is truly, truly remarkable. No, he can't, I mean, he can, theoretically, but the likelihood of him giving us those Puka Nacua games is just not as high. But the man has been the wide receiver 3 overall for 3 straight years. Even in a down year, he is still the most consistent receiver in the NFL. Now, after that, we've got drama. Right off the bat here, obviously, there is more potential for off-field issues with Rashee Rice. Shocker there. If you have him on your dynasty team, as I do, I fear we might be forever cooked. It was a great pick in theory, but man, we couldn't have predicted this. It's not our fault. Obviously, if anything comes via that of his suspension, he would not be here. But we don't know about that yet, so I'm going to talk about him. If there is no change in his availability in redraft, he will absolutely be a top 10 receiver. It is wild that we are heading into year 3 with Rice, and we still haven't actually seen his ceiling because of injury and suspension. But here we are with the opportunity to see him as a true wide receiver 1 here. A true wide receiver 1. Now, with Patrick Mahomes' injury, that will play a factor, obviously, but because of where Rashee Rice plays on the field, often out of the slot and with a significantly lower ADOT than everybody else on the team. His ADOT is just 4.9. That is super low. Any lingering effects of Mahomes would least affect Rashee Rice. Now, we only saw Rashee Rice in 8 games this season, and he was a top 10 receiver in 5 of them. That is pretty good there. He averaged nearly 10 targets per game and had 6 touchdowns over that time span. The 3 games where he was not a top 10 receiver were against Denver, Houston, and the LA Chargers. That is totally understandable. That happens to literally everybody. If he plays this season with no impending legal issues, I really see this as a potential top 5 breakout season for him. Now let's circle back to the Giants. This one is very much so obviously tied to what we talked about with Jackson Dart. Malik Neighbors is incredible. I would take him, all things equal, in the top 10 all day, any day of the week. But unfortunately, when draft day comes around, we've got the potential second-year regression that we discussed with Jackson Dart and Neighbors coming off a significant injury with a questionable timeline here. ACL recoveries are not all equal. For every Christian Watson that makes it back ahead of schedule and takes on a full workload with no issues, there is a Javonte Williams that straight up just doesn't look right for another season until he gets extra recovery under his belt. Add in the fact that the Giants do have the potential to take a wide receiver in the draft because they have to prepare for potentially being without him. And we add in the fact that, again, we have not seen Jackson Dart and Malik Neighbors play a full game together, and technically not even a half game together. Add in the fact that we've got a new coaching staff coming in. There's going to be a lot going on. The only thing keeping Neighbors' ADP as high as it is the fact that most of the true wide receiver ones that are going after him have a lot of quarterback issues that are greater than his. Now, this is a fun one. This is not one player. This is like literally three players. Three players. Yeah, this is literally three players. You will notice something about my rankings that is missing. This is the first time that we do not have a Tampa Bay wide receiver in my top 24. I can't remember the last time that would have been. I don't know if I've ever physically done it. I don't believe I would have ever not had a Tampa Bay wide receiver ranked in the top 24. Crazy. And I don't know if that will change at any point in this offseason because Mike Evans is a free agent and the Bucs have been very focused on loyalty and contract extensions with both Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. But considering that Todd Bowles did a clean house sweep, the possibility that Evans exits, it does exist. If he is gone, I still would not bump up Chris Godwin or Emeka Egbuka into the top 24 because there is way too much of an unknown in terms of how their workload would be split. And Jalen McMillan's presence is very real. Now, Godwin did not look like himself this season. And he is going to be entering 30 years old, heading into 2026. His best days might just be behind him. Emeka Egbuka showed massive upside very early and then straight up pulled a Brian Thomas Jr. very early and disappeared. That was quick. You couldn't even wait a season there. Even if Mike Evans remains a Buck, he would, to his credit, be the first Buck taken off the board for sure. No question about that. If he remains with Tampa, he is the first one I'm taking off the board. Because when all three were healthy this season, he was still the dominant wide receiver one and the target leader there in the late season there when he returned from injury. I would not expect that to change. But at his age, it is very tough to draft him where we would have been drafting him previously because of the age-related injuries happening 2 years in a row. It's just extremely risky that he would not make it through the season. And finally, let's wrap things up at tight end. Very standard at the top. Again, super standard. Our big three remain our big three. All things equal, all things healthy. They have the ceiling that nobody else can touch. Then we have Tucker Kraft, hopefully returning from an injury. Then we've got Tyler Warren, hopefully getting a quarterback back that actually benefits him. And then the guy that I want to highlight here is Harold Fannin Jr. coming in heavy here with a very lofty ranking. Even with the coaching changes coming, Fannin is still going to be a top 10 tight end in rankings this season. It is definitely scary knowing that Kevin Stefanski's system heavily favored tight ends, right? That's why he loved Dylan Gabriel. He thought that he was the perfectly adequate quarterback to hit tight ends at the rate that he wanted. Now, knowing the odds of a new coach coming in and having that same aggressive target share towards tight ends is very slim. The second issue here is that I don't see a scenario where the Browns don't try to draft a wide receiver one. A lot of pundits will speculate that they're going to, and they should draft a quarterback early, right? Because you do need a quarterback. Is there one on roster that can actually be your franchise quarterback? That's another debate for another day, because I don't want y'all arguing with me in the comments on that one. That would be a special video. I know how tussling starts to happen when we talk about Shedeur Sanders. But that's a lot of quarterback capital tied up there between draft and between money paid to Deshaun Watson here. And one thing is for sure, you cannot draft another quarterback and expect any of them to be successful. Even if you drafted the top, the most elite high end, it's gonna be a problem still because you don't have a wide receiver one. That's a problem. And calling anyone on the roster a wide receiver two is kind of pushing it. That seems petty, right? But let's be honest. Where is Jerry Jeudy sitting even on a team like Denver now? Is he the wide receiver two on that team right now? If he was there, I don't think he would be. So yeah, there are a lot of factors that will potentially change with the Browns' outlook. But Fannin's impact as a rookie was truly remarkable, despite the fact that we will likely have changes in coaches and philosophies and incoming pass catchers. He is worth the risk to draft. Finally, one note here so you don't think I'm crazy. Travis Kelce's ranking is purely just a courtesy reminder that he does exist. We don't know how to rank him unless he actually tells us if he's going to return here. If he returns for another season, low-end tight end one at best is kind of pushing it here. He will definitely fall behind these top 10 options who are far more solidified there. There was clearly, unfortunately, a lot of regression in age. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel. You can find me across all social media platforms at It's Tara Time, so make sure that you are locked in, subscribe, turn on notifications. We got more videos coming this off season. We're going to start diving into rookies and free agency, best ball drafts, and so much more.